Fox News alert, new questions raised in the wake of the deadly terror attacks in Brussels about whether the world is doing enough to try to battle ISIS. Two of the suspects in the Brussels attacks were no strangers to police, and yet they were able to plan and carry out their plot. The investigation leading to new raids in Brussels today. Police officers seen carrying bags and boxes out of an apartment in an area near Molenbeek, where the suspected bombers live. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell Utterback is a retired U.S. Army Special Forces operative and Colorado National Guardsman, a frequent guest of this program. Mitch, thanks for being with us.
Good afternoon, John.
Belgium, it is said, is Europe's most vulnerable country. Why is that?
Well, as we've seen recently reported, John, Belgium's intelligence services, their police services are completely unsynchronized. More than a dozen police departments serving just the city of Brussels. Part of the country speaks Flemish, part of the country speaks French. It's really an ideal location for an enemy like ISIS to exploit the vulnerabilities of that country and their society.
And they seem to have done that. I mean, obviously, these attacks coming on the heels of the arrest of one of the people who organized the Paris attacks. Everybody thought with his arrest, you know, there would be this font of information coming forward. Instead, you get a huge and deadly terror attack.
Yes, John. Molenbeek, I consider Molenbeek in military terms. Molenbeek is a forward operating base for ISIS, a completely insular, cut off from Belgian society, a neighborhood where for decades people have failed to assimilate and people have been radicalized internally. So I consider Molenbeek a FOB. It's ISIS's FOB in Europe, just like we've had forward operating bases in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's definitely the most dangerous place in Europe for ISIS to spring from.
Well, if Molenbeek is the forward operating base, then you've got the command and control structure in places like Raqqa. There doesn't seem to be much appetite in the administration for doing anything more than a very limited air campaign to try and take them out. Is that, in your view, a mistake?
It's just not enough, John. The latest strike report from Operation Inherent Resolve lists things like fighting positions destroyed, vehicles destroyed, rocket rails destroyed. We are bombing things and reporting it internationally that in previous years wouldn't have left the squadron debriefing room when the pilots landed back on the ship. But we're doing so little, we have to elevate the information that we're putting out to make it more important than it really is. We're definitely not doing enough.
Is it a lack of targets, or is it concern over civilian casualties?
Well, part of it, I'm certain, is due to weather in this time of year. Lack of targets is always a possibility. And as we know that our rules of engagement are really restrictive in terms of civilian casualties. We have to try to not harm civilian populations. But as we know, these guys blend in with civilian populations. And as we've seen, you really are only going to root out terrorists from within civilian areas by sending guys with guns in there to shoot them in the head.
I know you also have some advice for Americans, you know, who might be concerned about a terror attack here. One of the things we saw in San Bernardino was that there was a neighbor who was suspicious but didn't want to be accused of singling people out. What do you say to Americans who are concerned?
Well, no one's going to accuse you if you make an anonymous tip to your local authorities. And it's much better to have your concerns allayed by calling in something and let the authorities go investigate. Please give them a reason to go. Give them a cause or a reason to go knock on the door and see what's going on. Who knows what they're going to see? But I would encourage everybody, if you have a neighbor and this lady leaves for work wearing a headscarf and you've never met her before, please go and introduce yourself. Ask her some polite questions about where her family's from. It's very appropriate to ask somebody from the Middle East or North Africa about their family. It's the most culturally appropriate thing to do, and it's a great reason to get to know your neighbors better.
Mitch Utterback is a retired U.S. Army Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel. Mitch, thank you.